All right, so, we've all seen the pictures, right?
Mhm.
Germany,
Hmm.
Spain, Italy. I mean, just towns and cities absolutely hammered by these floods.
Yeah, it's been pretty intense.
And it's not just Europe either, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we saw it in New York,
Yeah.
pretty bad. Houston, even London. It used to be like, oh, heavy rain. Now it's like streets or rivers.
Right.
And it really makes you think, right? Like, is this all climate change, or is there something else going on here?
Well, yeah, I mean,
That's the question, right?
yeah, like how we build our cities,
Yeah.
how we maintain things, the choices we've made. We all know climate change is the thing. It's a big thing.
Right.
But is it the whole story? That's what we kind of want to take a deep dive into today.
Yeah, and that's really the crucial starting point, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, climate change is having a huge impact on extreme weather.
Right.
But if we just focus on that, we kind of miss the other part of the story,
Yeah.
which is that we've built systems and made decisions that actually make this whole thing worse.
Right. Like it's fascinating to think about how a more intense climate like we're seeing now interacts with the vulnerabilities that we've created,
Yeah.
in our cities and our infrastructure.
Yeah. Okay. So let's kind of break down what we've been seeing.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at Germany, right? These like unexpected summer storms, rivers
Yeah.
just overflowing, these intense flash floods. I mean, it's like it came out of nowhere.
Right.
Then you've got New York, and it wasn't just coastal flooding. They had major flooding from just a massive amount of rain.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still, turned streets into rivers.
Yeah. It's unbelievable.
And then like Spain and Italy, I mean, highways just gone washed away.
Yeah. The pictures are crazy.
It's wild. And even in places like Houston, London, we're seeing this like more and more flooding from rain that, maybe 10, 20 years ago wouldn't have caused these problems.
Right.
So it really feels like you've got this intensity of the weather
Yeah.
meeting something that's just not ready for it.
Exactly. I mean, these events are happening all over the place. But the thing they all have in common is that our infrastructure, our planning, it's just not enough anymore when you get this kind of weather.
Right.
Like, take Germany. They had warnings, but a lot of the local infrastructure, especially in those smaller towns, it just wasn't built to handle that much water.
Yeah.
And then you've got New York, super dense, tons of paved surfaces.
Right.
When you get that much rain all at once, the drainage systems just can't cope. A lot of them are old.
Yeah.
So it's not just the rain itself, it's what that rain hits when it lands.
Right. Yeah. It's like it's got to go somewhere.
Exactly.
So, okay, let's talk about climate change because obviously it's a huge part of this.
Of course.
The science is pretty clear. Warmer air holds more moisture,
Right.
which means heavier rainfall. We're
Exactly.
seeing faster snowmelt, which, affects river levels.
Yeah, adds to the problem.
And then the long-term dangers of rising sea levels, storm surges.
Mhm.
I mean, that's a constant concern. And scientists have been, saying this for years, decades even, that this is what's going to happen as the planet warms.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fundamental part of this whole thing, right?
Yeah.
More atmospheric water vapor equals more potential for intense rain.
Right.
And then you connect that to, rising global temperatures,
Yeah.
changes in weather patterns.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a surprise that we're seeing these kinds of events more often.
Right. And that they're more intense.
And more severe, exactly. The science on this is very clear.
But here's where it gets really interesting to me. Okay, so we've known about this risk for a long time.
Yeah.
Why are so many places so unprepared when these floods actually hit?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah, this is where the bad planning argument comes in.
Yeah.
Think about New York again. You mentioned those aging drainage systems.
Right.
It's like they were designed for a different climate,
Yeah.
a different amount of rainfall.
When it wasn't raining this much.
Yeah. And then you've got the constant development, especially in areas that are natural floodplains.
Oh, yeah.
It's like we're building in the places where the water is supposed to go.
Right. It's like we're asking for it.
It's like, yeah, we're making ourselves more vulnerable.
Exactly. And the key insight there is that we're not just building in the wrong places.
Yeah.
We're actually getting rid of the natural defenses that used to protect us.
Yeah. Yeah. We're like actively making it worse.
Exactly. It's a question of resilience or the lack of it.
Right.
Developing on floodplains is a perfect example.
Yeah.
These areas are designed to absorb water, to let it spread out.
Right.
We build on them. We take that away.
Yeah.
Same thing with outdated infrastructure. Whether it's drainage in cities or flood defenses in rural areas,
Right.
they're just not built for the amount of water we're seeing now.
Yeah. It's like trying to fit, a gallon of water into a pint glass.
Exactly.
And it's not just the physical stuff either.
Yeah.
Right. It's not just concrete and pipes.
No.
I mean, look at those 2021 floods in Germany.
Right.
There were reports that early warnings weren't taken seriously.
Yeah, communication breakdowns.
Yeah, communication was a mess. And then some of those smaller towns that got hit the hardest,
Yeah,
they just weren't prepared at all.
it's a lack of preparedness.
Yeah, and then you look at all these cities around the world where we've paved over wetlands, which are like these natural sponges.
Right, they soak up the water.
Yeah, stormwater drains clogged, haven't been updated in forever. Emergency services are overwhelmed. I mean, it just feels like there are these systemic issues,
It's not just about the rain.
yeah, that go way beyond just like, oh, we had a bad storm.
It's how we've set things up.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that these human decisions, these systemic issues, they actually make the impact of the natural hazards worse.
Absolutely. Paving over wetlands is the perfect example. We're literally getting rid of nature's way of dealing with water.
Yeah, and then you've got these underfunded emergency services trying to respond to these disasters.
Right, they're stretched thin.
It just makes you think, you know, are we really taking this seriously? Are we putting our money where our mouth is when we talk about these risks?
Yeah, it raises some serious questions about our priorities.
Yeah, okay, so if planning and infrastructure are so important,
Yeah.
why aren't we doing more? Why aren't we seeing more proactive stuff happening?
Well, that's where the politics and the money come in.
Right.
I mean, it's politically easier to just blame climate change.
Yeah.
It's a global problem, right?
It just feels
Feels like something that's out of our control.
Yeah, like what are we going to do about it?
But when you start talking about upgrading infrastructure, rethinking how we build cities,
Right.
making tough decisions about rebuilding in risky areas,
Yeah.
that's complicated,
Yep.
it's expensive,
Hmm.
and it's not always popular.
No, not at all.
So, politicians, they like to talk about climate change in the long term,
Yeah.
but when it comes to these short-term projects that are disruptive, that cost money,
Right.
it's a harder sell.
Yeah, it's like the long-term vision versus like what's going to get me elected next year.
Exactly. And it really highlights that disconnect
Right.
between talking about climate action
Yeah.
and actually being willing to do what needs to be done.
It's like walking the walk.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder too, right? Like, is it really worse or are we just seeing more of it because there's more media coverage now?
Well, that's a good question.
But the data we looked at it
Mm-hmm.
actually shows that the number of flood disasters have gone up a lot in the past like 50 years.
Yeah, it's a real trend.
Which is interesting because, most of the deaths from flooding still happen in developing countries,
Right.
which, makes sense. They've got more vulnerabilities, less robust infrastructure.
They're not as well equipped to deal with it.
But even in wealthier countries where more people survive these floods,
Right.
we're seeing a big increase in the loss of homes, jobs, savings. People's livelihoods are being affected.
The economic impact is huge.
Yeah. So even if you think you're safe,
Yeah.
the impacts are real. And the thing to remember here for everyone listening is that even if you don't live right on the coast, near a river, your community might still be vulnerable because of this outdated infrastructure or bad planning.
That's a really important point.
So it's not just a coastal problem.
No, it's much wider than that.
And the data, I think, is really important here.
Yeah, it gives us that objective view.
It shows us that this risk is real, it's growing, and it's not going away.
And it affects everyone.
Yeah, and the difference between, how many people die versus the economic losses in wealthier countries,
Right.
I think that tells us something too, right? Like,
Yeah.
we're getting better at saving lives,
Yeah.
but we're still getting hammered
Right.
economically.
Which means we need to think about preparedness in a broader sense. It's not just about surviving the flood, it's about what happens after.
Yeah, being able to bounce back.
Exactly, rebuilding your community. And that takes more than just, sandbags and emergency shelters.
Okay, so let's say we all agree that this isn't just about climate change.
Yeah.
What can we actually do about it? There's got to be some good news here, right?
There are some promising solutions out there.
Okay, like what?
Well, we've seen some cool stuff with green roofs.
Yeah.
They can absorb tons of rainwater,
Uh-huh.
which takes the pressure off of those drainage systems.
Right. It's like a natural solution.
Yeah, and it's good for the environment, too.
Right, so it's win-win.
Exactly. Then there's the idea of floating neighborhoods.
Yeah, like in the Netherlands.
Yeah, it's a radical idea.
But it works.
But it works. They figured it out, and then you've got technology, things like digitizing storm drains so we can see blockages in real time.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
Using AI to map flood risk down to the street level
Wow.
so we can really target our interventions.
So we know where the problems are.
Exactly. These are all really promising things.
Yeah, it feels like we're starting to think differently about this problem.
I think so. And investing in these natural solutions.
Right.
It's not just good for the environment, it actually saves money in the long run because you don't have to rely so much on those traditional drainage systems.
Right, it's like working with nature instead of against it.
Exactly.
But, it also makes you think about the bigger picture, right? Like, it's great to have these solutions,
Yeah,
but how do we actually make them happen?
that's the next challenge.
It's not enough to just have the idea.
No, we need to invest in them.
Yeah.
Educate people, get them on board.
Uh-huh.
And this is really important. We need the political will to actually do this stuff.
To prioritize it and actually follow through.
Because this is about long-term thinking.
Yeah, and it brings us back to that question of blame, right? Or maybe responsibility is a better word.
Right.
It's too easy to just point the finger at climate change and say, well, that's why this happened.
It's more complicated than that.
It is. We have to look at the choices we've made about how we build, where we build.
How we maintain things?
Yeah, what risks we've ignored.
Absolutely. And we can't control the weather, but we can control how prepared we are for it.
That's a good point.
So next time you see a city underwater and everyone's saying, oh, it's climate change.
Right.
Maybe we should also be asking, what did we do to prepare for this? What could we have done differently?
Yeah, because the real disaster isn't just the storm itself.
It's how vulnerable we are to it.
Yeah, it's the lack of action, the lack of foresight.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we have agency in this.
Right.
Climate change makes things worse, but how badly it affects us depends on us.
That's a powerful way to think about it.
And it means we have the power to change things.
To make our communities more resilient.
To adapt and to build a better future.
Well said. Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about this with me.
My pleasure. It's been a great conversation.
It's a really important topic, and I think, it's something we need to keep talking about.
Absolutely. We need to understand these connections if we want to move beyond just reacting to these events.
We need to be proactive.
Yeah, building a sustainable future.
Exactly.
And on that note, we'll leave everyone with a little challenge.
Okay.
Think about where you live.
Yeah.
What are the vulnerabilities when it comes to flooding? What's being done to prepare? And what are the gaps?
What are the things we're not doing?
Yeah, and what questions should you be asking your local leaders to make sure your community is ready for whatever comes next?
That's a good homework assignment.
It's something to really think about because it affects all of us. And for our next deep dive,
Ooh, what's next?
we're going to be talking about earthquakes. Can we actually predict those massive ones, or is it still basically an educated guess?
I can't wait to find out.
Yeah, so stay tuned and stay informed. We'll see you next time.